I want you to imagine, just for a second, like a massive multi-billion-dollar corporate project.
Right.
And the two top executives at this organization suddenly realize that they fundamentally disagree on, well, the entire future vision of the company.
A total nightmare for any board of directors.
Exactly. But it gets worse. The tension just boils over, all negotiations completely fail, and they settle the dispute by, and I mean this, literally throwing cars at each other on an airport tarmac.
Yeah, not your typical HR dispute.
No, definitely not. But this wasn't just, a crazy movie script. Well, it was a script, but it was also the reality of what basically happened behind the scenes at Marvel Studios in 2016. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are digging into the source material surrounding the absolute blockbuster that is Captain America: Civil War.
And it really is the perfect lens for looking at this film, because on the surface, this was simply the 13th entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right.
A giant superhero sequel that was fundamentally designed to just sell popcorn and, merchandise.
Action figures, T-shirts, all of it.
Yeah, exactly. But digging into the actual production history reveals a project that was infinitely more complex. I mean, we are looking at a movie that forced unprecedented corporate truces, triggered a literal restructuring of a major Hollywood studio, and completely dismantled the traditional good versus evil narrative that we usually expect from these kinds of blockbusters.
We have so much ground to cover today. I mean, the boardroom standoffs, the absolute legal nightmares of the casting process, and some massive leaps in visual effects technology. But to understand why this movie almost tore a real-world studio apart, we really have to start with the actual on-screen plot.
Definitely.
Because the inciting incident is surprisingly, bureaucratic.
Okay.
Especially for a movie with laser beams and flying suits.
Yeah.
It revolves entirely around this piece of legislation called the Sokovia Accords.
Right. The premise is entirely rooted in consequences, because the United Nations looks at the Avengers and basically sees a private, super-powered militia.
Running around unchecked.
Exactly. This is a group that recently dropped an entire city out of the sky in a fictional country called Sokovia while they were fighting a rogue AI.
Yeah, not a great look for public relations.
Not at all. And then, shortly after that, they accidentally blew up a building in Lagos, Nigeria, during an attempt to stop the theft of a biological weapon. So the UN steps in and says, look, there has to be an oversight panel. The days of acting unilaterally are over.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the politicians want to put a leash on the superheroes. But the brilliance of the script and what the directors, Anthony and Joe Russo, pull off here is how they use this political premise to execute a complete character reversal for the two leads.
Oh, absolutely.
You have Tony Stark, Iron Man, and Steve Rogers, Captain America. And based on their earlier films, you would think their reactions to this UN legislation would be the exact opposite of what actually happens.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how that reversal becomes the emotional engine of the whole film. Let's look at Tony Stark first. Historically, he is the egomaniacal rebel.
Right, the guy who does whatever he wants.
Exactly. In a previous film, he famously sat in front of a congressional committee and just flat out refused to hand over his Iron Man technology to the government. He was the ultimate privatization advocate. But in this story, he is the one aggressively lobbying for UN oversight.
Which feels super jarring, right?
Yeah.
Until you look at the psychological wear and tear he's actually been through.
Yeah, the source material makes it very clear that Stark is burdened by this crushing guilt complex. I mean, he has experienced these vivid, traumatic visions of planetary destruction. And more importantly, he was directly responsible for creating Ultron, the very AI that destroyed Sokovia in the first place.
Right, he built the thing that dropped the city.
Exactly. He is traumatized by his own unchecked ambition. Stark has reached a point where he feels that without boundaries, without institutional oversight, the Avengers are really no better than the villains they fight. For him, yielding to the authority of the Accords is, the only responsible moral choice left.
And it makes total sense for him. But then you look across the aisle at Steve Rogers, Captain America, the ultimate soldier, a man who volunteered for a super dangerous experimental procedure just so he could serve his country in World War II.
Right.
He literally wears an American flag on his chest.
He does. And yet the Russos take this former military poster boy and basically turn him into a full-blown insurgent by the end of the narrative.
It's wild.
It is. Rogers flatly refuses to sign the Accords, but, and this is key, his stance isn't born out of arrogance. It's rooted in a really deep, earned skepticism of political
Yeah,
agendas.
because of what happened to him recently.
Exactly. He woke up in the modern world only to discover that the global intelligence agency he worked for had been secretly infiltrated by a fascist organization known as Hydra. So he has seen firsthand that institutions are run by people with shifting motives, which makes them inherently fallible.
He trusts his own moral compass to dictate who needs saving far more than he trusts the UN panel to hand it like a geopolitical permission slip. It's basically like looking at a high-stakes startup where the two brilliant founders suddenly realize their core philosophies are completely incompatible. One founder wants total corporate compliance because it's the only way to survive the fallout of their past mistakes, and the other refuses to compromise the original disruptive ethos they were built on.
That's a great way to put it.
It's a profound philosophical debate playing out through capes and robotic armor.
And you have to note that the narrative is meticulously balanced to ensure neither side is portrayed as the definitive bad guy. We are just looking at the facts here. Stark's desperate need for accountability is presented just as validly as Roger's need for autonomy.
Right. The movie doesn't take sides.
It really doesn't. The tragedy of the film is that both men are acting out of a genuine, desperate desire to protect the world.
Which is great storytelling. But as compelling as that ideological rift is on screen, the real civil war was actually happening behind the camera.
Oh, absolutely.
The off-screen conflict over this ending almost killed the movie before a single frame was shot.
The corporate pushback was immense. Executives at Marvel Entertainment, which, was the corporate committee overseeing Marvel Studios at the time, they fundamentally despised the idea of the heroes fighting each other in the third act. They were terrified of the concept.
Wait, I have to side with the executives here for a second. Let's just put this in perspective for everyone. You are running a franchise that mints billions of dollars. You have your two biggest cash cows. The sources note that Robert Downey Jr. alone was paid $40 million just to appear in this film.
$40 million, yes.
Plus back-end profits, meaning he took a percentage of the actual box office revenue on top of his base salary. And your directors want to spend $250 million to make half your global audience actively hate one of your main heroes. I mean, alienating your own fan base is objectively terrible business.
From a purely brand protection standpoint, yeah, the executives' anxiety was entirely justified. I mean, they were panicking. Their proposed solution was to rewrite the third act completely.
What do they want to do instead?
Well, they wanted the Avengers to put aside their squabbles, fly to a secret base in Siberia, and team up to fight a horde of zombified super soldiers created by Hydra.
Wow. A completely generic, safe superhero ending. The good guys team up to punch nameless, faceless bad guys.
Exactly. But Joe and Anthony Russo were completely against it. Joe Russo went on record stating that watching the Avengers fight generic super soldiers was, quote, not an interesting movie.
He's not wrong.
No, he's not. The directors argued that audiences were experiencing fatigue with giant, city-destroying third acts. They wanted the stakes to be intimate. They wanted the emotional devastation of a family tearing itself apart.
But the executives wouldn't budge.
They wouldn't. The tension escalated to the point where the Russo brothers actually threatened to quit the film entirely.
Seriously?
Yes. They were fully prepared to walk away from the biggest movie of their careers rather than shoot the zombie-fighting ending.
Talk about calling the bluff of one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world.
It was incredibly risky. This standoff became so intense that it required intervention from the absolute top of the corporate ladder. Alan F. Horn, the head of Walt Disney Studios, the parent company that owns Marvel, he had to step in to arbitrate.
The big boss.
Yeah. And Horn ultimately sided with the Russo brothers and Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, giving them the green light to make the film as originally intended.
But the fallout from that one argument was monumental. It didn't just save the script, it triggered a massive corporate restructuring.
It really did.
Following this clash, Marvel Studios was physically moved out from under the purview of Marvel Entertainment. Kevin Feige began reporting directly to Walt Disney Studios. This single creative argument about a third-act ending literally reshaped the corporate hierarchy of the most successful film studio in the world.
It was a watershed moment for creative control and blockbuster filmmaking.
Yeah.
But, once they had the green light to pursue this emotionally devastating family feud, they realized they had a structural problem with the script. They couldn't just rely on the characters we'd been watching for years.
Because if it's just the original team arguing, the audience has already picked sides based on past movies. They needed fresh blood. They needed outsiders who could step into this war without any pre-existing baggage.
Exactly. As Kevin Feige noted, they needed third parties with completely different points of view from Tony Stark or Steve Rogers. And you can see that with the introduction of Black Panther T'Challa, played by the late Chadwick Boseman.
Oh man, his performance was incredible.
It was. And the level of dedication Boseman brought to this role is staggering. According to the production sources, he didn't even formally audition. Marvel simply called him in for a discussion about his vision for the character.
He essentially walked into the room and dictated how the sovereign ruler of a fictional African nation was going to be portrayed.
Yes, he insisted on grounding the character in authentic African culture. He independently took it upon himself to learn Xhosa, which is a real-world language spoken in South Africa. Yeah, he was actually taught the language by John Connie, the esteemed actor cast to play his father, King T'Chaka. And beyond the language, Boseman developed the Wakandan accent himself and maintained it both on and off camera for the entire duration of the shoot.
That is just incredible method dedication for a role that requires you to, run around in a vibranium catsuit.
Truly.
But if Black Panther represents royalty and geopolitical weight, the other new addition represents the exact opposite end of the spectrum, a teenager from Queens, Spider-Man.
Oh, yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The inclusion of Tom Holland's Spider-Man is basically a masterclass in Hollywood legal maneuvering.
It was an absolute logistical miracle because Spider-Man's film rights did not belong to Marvel or Disney. They were owned by Sony Pictures.
Right, going back to the 90s.
Yeah, in the 90s, when Marvel was facing bankruptcy, they sold off the film rights to their most popular characters.
Yeah.
So bringing Spider-Man into a Disney-owned Marvel movie required a historic, incredibly complex legal treaty between rival studios.
It's basically like a construction crew building the penthouse suite of a skyscraper, while the lawyers are still downstairs arguing over who owns the foundation.
That is a perfect analogy.
Because the Russo brothers have been lobbying for months to include him in the script. Marvel executives repeatedly warned them to develop a plan B because the Sony negotiations were just so incredibly fragile.
And the directors simply refused to write a plan B. They claimed they never even storyboarded the movie without Spider-Man. I mean, they cast Tom Holland after an extensive screen test to check his chemistry with Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, but they were writing him into major set pieces while the legal departments were still trying to figure out if it was even legally permissible for him to be on set.
The creative vision was sprinting ahead while the business deals were barely tying their shoes.
Yeah, the commercial and promotional agreements between Sony and Disney were so sensitive that the directors felt they were constantly in danger of inadvertently torpedoing the deal just by shooting the scenes. But Holland's inclusion brought a crucial, grounded, kid perspective to this war of literal titans.
So the corporate restructuring is finished. The peace treaties with Sony are signed. You have your cast. Now you have to actually visually execute this thing.
Right, the hard part.
And that brings us to the Leipzig-Halle airport sequence.
Mm-hmm.
How do you pull off the biggest comic book battle in cinema history?
The directors referred to it as the splash panel. You know, in comic books, a splash panel is a full-page, highly detailed illustration used for major impactful moments. They wanted to bring that exact feeling to life. And to do it, they pushed the boundaries of filmmaking technology. Captain America. Civil War was the very first film to utilize IMAX's digital 2D cameras.
The customized Arri Alexa 65. Let's talk about why that matters, because I know it's not just a fancy brand name.
No, it's not. The Alexa 65 features a massive sensor, much larger than standard cinema cameras. It captures an unprecedented amount of light, color data, and resolution. Trent Opelok, the cinematographer, he rigged these massive high-resolution cameras to drones, dollies, and cranes specifically for this 15-minute sequence.
Wow, just for that one fight.
Yes. And the resolution was so incredibly dense that he had to change his entire approach to framing. He opted for wider medium close-ups instead of extreme close-ups, simply because the camera was picking up almost too much detail on the actors' faces, and he needed the audience to see the massive scale of the environment.
But capturing the footage is only half the battle, right? The visual effects coordination for this one sequence is mind-boggling.
Oh, nearly 20 different visual effects studios contributed to the film. For the airport battle alone, the scope expanded so rapidly during post-production that Russell Earl, the VFX supervisor at Industrial Light and Magic, he revealed they ultimately replaced 99% of everything that was shot on location.
Wait, 99%? Are you serious?
Almost entirely. The actors were essentially lifted from the physical plates shot in Germany and Atlanta and placed into a fully digital, computer-generated environment.
That is insane.
Spider-Man is a perfect example of this. Because of those ongoing legal complexities regarding his suit design and the sheer physical impossibility of his movements, the Spider-Man you see in the airport battle is a fully digital double.
Okay, so Tom Holland is on set in a physical motion capture suit.
Yeah.
Covered in all those tracking markers.
Yes, exactly. Those markers track his physical performance and translate it into a digital skeleton. But the final red and blue suit you see on screen is entirely computer-generated. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this level of digital world building really set a new technological benchmark that the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe would rely on for the next decade.
And the digital manipulation wasn't just for the massive action scenes. We have to talk about the de-aging technology used on Robert Downey Jr. in the opening of the film.
Right, that was handled by Lola VFX, and it was a staggering technical achievement. It was a 4,000 frame sequence where they rolled Tony Stark's age back to his early 20s.
And the way they do that is fascinating to me. They aren't just blurring his wrinkles like a social media filter.
No, it's much more complex.
They actually analyzed footage of Downey from his 1987 film Less Than Zero. They track his current performance, capture all of his subtle micro-expressions, and then digitally project the skin texture and jawline of his 20-something self over his modern face. It's essentially a digital facelift that preserves the actual acting performance.
The technical precision required to pull off a 4,000-frame digital cosmetic procedure without dipping into the uncanny valley is just remarkable.
It makes you wonder, though, does knowing that 99% of an epic scene is a computer farm, or that a character's face is digitally painted on, does that ruin the movie magic for you? Or does the sheer logistical coordination, getting 20 independent studios to seamlessly stitch together a massive brawl, make it even more impressive?
That's a great question for the audience.
Right. For me, the fact that thousands of artists can organize that kind of chaos and still make me feel genuine emotion for these characters is the real magic.
I completely agree. It proves that visual effects are most effective when they are used to support character-driven storytelling. If the audience doesn't care about the ideological debate between Stark and Rogers, all the rendering power in the world wouldn't make the airport scene compelling.
So what does this all mean? When the dust finally settled, Captain America: Civil War grossed $1.15 billion globally. It was the highest-grossing film of 2016. It proved that modern audiences are hungry for more than just mindless explosions and alien invasions.
We want actual stakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We want high-stakes, emotional conflict where the line between hero and villain is blurred. Both sides are a little bit right and a little bit wrong. It is an absolute masterclass in managing a massive ensemble of moving parts, both in the script and in the boardroom, without ever losing sight of the human element.
And if we want to talk about the human element, we really have to look at the film's villain, Helmut Zemo, played by Daniel Bruhl.
Oh, such a good villain.
The way his character is constructed raises a fascinating point about power. Consider this. Zemo is not an alien warlord. He has no superpowers, he has no flashy costume, no magical artifacts, and no robot army. He is just a normal, grieving intelligence officer from Sokovia. Yet, he is one of the very few villains in this entire cinematic universe to actually achieve his goal by the end of the movie.
It's a really sobering thought.
Yeah.
He doesn't just put up a good fight, he totally succeeds in breaking the Avengers.
He fractures the most powerful team on the planet from the inside out, and he does it using nothing but patience, information, and grief.
Just ripping off the Band-Aid on their old trauma.
Exactly. He uncovers a decades-old secret that a brainwashed Bucky Barnes murdered Tony Stark's parents, and he simply weaponizes that truth at the perfect moment to make the heroes destroy each other. It's the ultimate asymmetrical warfare. And I'd ask you to ponder what that says about our modern world, because it suggests a deeply unsettling reality. The greatest threat to a superpower isn't a bigger external weapon. The greatest threat is the weaponization of its own internal divisions.
Wow. It all comes back to the beginning, doesn't it? It's not the rival company or the hostile takeover you have to worry about. It's what happens when the two executives start throwing cars at each other in the parking lot.
Exactly.
It's the internal whispers that break the foundation.
That is a heavy, brilliant note to end on. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the sources. We will catch you on the next one.